last round. I hope you're not sweating too much. You need to wipe your brow, take a shot, get your breath. All right. Well, now we gotta do the crowd pleaser. We're gonna play a little kill fuck marry. Okay. Does this game exist in King's College?
Yeah. I've got to see. Kill fuck marry is probably the least worst thing that goes on in university halls or college dorms, as you call them in the UK, especially where people are politically concerned.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that because, my mother gets very upset with me when I use bad words. Okay. So one of my favorite parts about being an American, studying British politics, actually just studying anything that's gone on in the history of the UK, is just like the wealth of hilarious terms. Like everyone in the United States knows about the Ministry of Silly Walks, which I know was satire from Monty Python, but it sort of captures our American love of what strikes us as like the peculiarities of British English. So I wanted to open up the box here on like some of the funniest terms I think that exist in the UK, and just ask you to kill one, fuck one, and marry one. Are you uncomfortable? Have I triggered you? Like, are you game?
I am game. As long as, to be honest with you, as long as it's not doing the game with real people, that's absolutely fine.
Okay. All right. Well, we're not. We're only going to do it with theoretical concepts and inanimate objects. So you will make your mother proud. By the way, I don't know what any of these words mean, so you might actually have to do a little educating along the way. Okay.
No.
First up, what I think is the funniest word that exists in politics anywhere is, quote, a hung parliament.
Okay. Let me explain this quickly. A hung parliament is when no political party has enough seats after a general election for a majority in the House of Commons. You need 326 members of parliament. You need to win 326 seats in a general election to have a majority. That majority allows you basically to pick your cabinet, set the political agenda, pass your own laws, and assuming everybody votes with you, you can pass what you want, right? It's like having the president along with the House.
So it's like one party's grip on power is like a little bit flaccid, and the other party like is kind of aroused by their chance to win the next election, but like no one is like stiff enough to hold the line. So a hung parliament means that there has to be like a power sharing agreement where you scratch my back, I scratch yours, and we just kind of make it work.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we've had this. We've had a coalition government recently where the Conservatives partnered with the Liberal Democrats. We've also just had a hung parliament for a couple of years recently because we were going through the Brexit process, which was very divisive.
Okay.
Remains so to a point across like all levels of society, but especially in politics in the House of Parliament. So
don't you also have a rump parliament?
I'm gonna let myself down. I wouldn't know what that means off the top of my head.
Okay, well it's fake news. Okay, well I think our next term for you to kill, fuck, or marry is related. So this is a term that I thought for sure was like drug dealing lingo for Miami, like something that bankers laundering money for like I don't know, Bolivian drug lords would use, but apparently it's a term for British parliamentary politics. Confidence and supply. What the hell is confidence and supply?
I believe confidence and supply is when I think it's when one party basically, and I believe this is related to the hung parliament, but I think it's when one party basically sort of has the agreement of others to keep the government going, basically. I think like the parties have to be not too far apart, but I think they get the key stuff through, and there's some deal making involved.
What are they supplying? Are they supplying like
votes for like the really important stuff such as budgets or whatever. I think if a budget fails, I think it's really bad. So I think it's that stuff.
Okay, so it is kind of a drug dealing term. Like, we won't kill you on this turf, but like if you want to go and start dropping talking points over in some of these other places, like we'll rough you up or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. It's more of like a frenemies thing. I've been led to understand. My go on.
It's like friends with benefits inside of the hung parliament.
That's a good way of thinking about it, actually.
Okay. All right, last one. This is one that I've heard my entire life in the United States, describing people in all roles, like in boring offices, little league baseball teams. They'll say, that guy, he's a backbencher. But I think that's like a literal term, right? What is a backbencher?
Okay. So have you ever watched the Houses of Parliament in C-SPAN or something? Like, have you ever seen Prime Minister's Questions or anything like that?
It's like the Real Housewives of Westminster or something. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It will bring jar for overseas viewers, I imagine. Okay, so I'm going to do something with my hands. I hope it makes sense.
Okay.
You have these benches, right? And the benches, they go up like staircase. At the bottom, the Prime Minister sits, and he's flanked by senior members of his cabinet. He sits next to the Chancellor usually. Then you've got like Foreign Secretary, Energy
Secretary, the Treasury, or whatever it is.
Exactly.
Bonamide, something.
All that. And then there are ministers as well who sit at the front. They're called front benchers. They're the people who are directly in power. If you're a backbencher, generally speaking, you are not in like a position of power in your political party. So when you hear of Tory backbenchers, they're essentially people who are part of the governing party but aren't directly part of the government. They're not ministers, they're not cabinet members. Yes. And as such, they don't have to go with whatever the cabinet's position is on a given political issue. Say for example, I know that this is not a great example because everybody's been pretty much united with this, right? But say, for example, Ukraine, and you don't want to give some sort of aid or support to Zelensky for fear of escalating it, or you think the sanctions are too harsh or whatever. If you spoke out against it and you were from the front benches or in government, you'd likely have to resign to do so. If you're on the back benches, you can pretty much say whatever.
It's just like no one cares. You're like, bro, like, call me back when you're a big kid.
No, not exactly. In fact, a lot of people do care. There's a whip's office, and they spend a lot of energy trying to get backbenchers sort of to go with the government. But backbenchers can rebel on certain issues. I mean, it's the backbenchers who are sending in those letters of no confidence.
There we go. Okay, so all time is a flat circle, and all of these subjects connect. It's
exactly that.
It's almost like someone had a vision for this interview. Okay, backbenchers. It's also amazing how many terms in politics are just like visual things like that. Like my understanding is left wing and right wing comes from how the French after the revolution, whatever they called their parliament, would assemble. From royalists to burn them all and send them to hell. Backbencher, that makes sense. It's the way the room is built. And I've heard lobbyist comes from the people who would sort of shout at the MPs in the lobby of Westminster or Parliament or something like that. All these, they're just physical. Okay, well, the burden is now on your shoulders, William. So I'm going to need you to kill one of these. I'm going to need you to marry one of them, and then you're going to have to spend a sultry night in bed with one of them. So I don't know, man. It's a tough call. These are all great. I mean, I feel like confidence and supply. That sounds like a marriage, doesn't it?
It does, but also because it's the one where I trip myself up, and I know when I listen back to this, I've got that completely wrong. So that can be killed. I am going to spend my night in bed with, I think it's got to be the hung parliament, right? It's got to be the hung parliament. So that can be the fuck option. And
what gets you so, why are you so aroused by hung parliaments?
Well, to be fair, if there's a hung parliament, it's great for people like me because it means everything's sort of up for grabs in terms of a parliamentary vote, which means much more action, much more coverage, and also you can wager on these votes. You can wager on votes; they become competitive betting events. In the same way, the margin in the Senate is very tight right now.
Yeah.
You could have a betting or wagering market or a sports book on any big vote because of the president's basically a sort of like Jim. Is it Jim Manchin? No,
Joe Manchin.
Joe Manchin. Etc. And because those margins are really way thin, you can do that, right? And in a hung parliament, you can also do that. And we've made a lot of hay from hung parliament. So yeah, I would go with that. And I'm going to marry the term backbencher because, first of all, just from like a really picky point of view, just makes the most sense. It makes the most sense. It's the least confusing term. It makes the most sense. And I love those.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely marrying backbencher. And also I was able to explain it completely correctly. I know that I did. So it won't embarrass me when I listen back to this.
Well, I think also a backbencher is a good marry because, you're marrying stability, you're marrying potential, you're not buying, you marry a minister, a front bencher. It's probably someone at the apex of his or her power. They're only going down, you don't want to, that's not when you want to enter into a marriage. So I think you're a very wise man, William.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, let me, I've sort of reached the end of our voyage here, but let me ask you, we were kind of all over the place, but is there anything you want to talk about while you're here at the helm of the Star Spangled Gambler's Empire?
Well, thank you very much for letting me to the helm. I think we've covered an awful lot in this sort of really enjoyable voyage. I